Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here. Don't forget to subscribe. But today, we want to talk about technology and privacy. We're really not getting it, especially with our personal devices, our online accounts, and all of that. Now, I've done multiple segments on how to secure yourself from a lot of this, but it's a never-ending battle. And so today I want to focus on the aspect of privacy that is essentially government controlled. Now, I have two stories for you that really underscore that governments cannot fully ensure your privacy, or they're actually the ones that are leveraging our technology against us. Now, with that, we're going to start with the country of Zambia in southern Africa, because the U.S. Embassy there has just warned its citizens, meaning U.S. citizens, to be wary of new intrusive cybersecurity laws introduced into Zambia. The embassy issued this alert telling Americans that would be traveling there, quote, in planning to visit Zambia, of a new law that requires the interception and surveillance of all electronic communications in the country, end quote. Now, this includes, in this new law there, calls, emails, texts, and stream content, quote, in country to assess if they include any transmission of critical information, quote unquote, a term the law defines so broadly that it could apply to almost any activity. Again, this is according to the U.S. Embassy. Now, Zambia's government said that this law was needed to tackle online fraud, child abuse, etc., as well as the spread of disinformation. That is a problem worldwide, not just here in the United States. There are also fears that the law could be used against anybody who criticizes the government, especially since Zambia is going through elections next year, meaning they're in campaign mode. Some Zambians have expressed concerns that a new cybersecurity unit is being set up in the president's office. This law, quote, wouldn't just affect journalists or civil society organizations, it will affect everyone in Zambia. So that's essentially what we are talking about here, where a government is essentially making privacy laws that aren't really private. In other words, they are opening up the phones, they are checking the traffic to see what you are doing under the guise, essentially, of the lowest common denominator, things like, child abuse material. We all agree that needs to go away on the internet, but when it's like 0.001% of the entire population that is trafficking that junk, not to mention, anybody speaking up online, say, like, I'm not a fan of the current president of Zambia. Now, here we are. That person, because it's being run out of the president's office, might get flagged in some way, shape, or form and potentially lose rights. This is one of the big issues that we have worldwide. And as we are moving, essentially, basically more people, I should say, the world is moving in more autocratic, and more people are under authoritarian governments than democracies at the moment. These are the things that we are going to have to deal with and grapple with. Governments have never had the ability to data mine us and get into our lives in the way that they do now, thanks to technology. But this also applies to travelers as well. So the second story I want to talk about is anybody that is listening to this. I don't care if you're an American citizen, you are not an American citizen. If you are coming into the United States, heads up on this one, because U.S. Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, has the authority to inspect your electronic devices, including smartphones and laptops, without a warrant. Now, this applies to all travelers regardless of citizenship. In other words, aka American citizen, you can have this done to you as well. These inspections can occur at any U.S. port of entry and may involve anything from a quick check of visible files to an in-depth data extraction using advanced forensic tools. Now, let's talk about how CBP would search your electronic device. Now, these searches are classified into two distinct types. The first is a basic search. An officer can request access to an unlocked device and manually review its visible content. This includes photos, emails, call logs, documents, browser history, and apps. No external tools or advanced techniques are used during that type of inspection. Now, the other type of inspection is an advanced search. So, if there is a reasonable suspicion tied to legal violations or national security, officers can escalate the search with approval from a supervisor. This level of inspection involves connecting the device to forensic tools, think like a Celebrite device that allows for copying and analyzing data. CBP can then retain the device for up to 5 days, with possible extensions up to 7 days if further examination is deemed necessary. necessary. Travelers are advised to be cautious and informed when they are entering the United States, as digital privacy protections are limited at the border. In other words, the constitutional protections that we would have inside the United States don't necessarily apply at the border. They are looking for a potential national security threat. Now, what that means per se, I'm guessing that's pretty subjective based off of the officer. Obviously, they are trained on, what to look for and all of that. Most recently, we've had the cases in El Salvador where we know the officers are being trained to look for specific markings like tattoos that look like gang tattoos, and that has gotten people into trouble, et cetera, et cetera. But understand that is something that is on the table here. So it's important to know your rights and responsibilities at not just the U.S. border, but any border, because the United States may not be the only one that's doing it. The United States may not even have the harshest laws out there. I mean, look at China, North Korea, and other authoritarian states when it comes to technology. But at the U.S. border, let's talk about that, because although Customs and Border Protection hold significant power at U.S. points of entry, basically the rights of travelers differ based on your legal status. So if you're an American citizen, you're a U.S. citizen, you cannot be denied entry for declining to unlock your device or your laptop. However, they can confiscate the device for further examination and then delay its return to you. So in other words, they're going to let you in, but they're still going to take your cell phone or your laptop or whatever if they deem that necessary. Now, if you're a green card holder, meaning you are a legal immigrant that has the right to live and work in the United States, we call them green card holders, lawful permanent residents, you may challenge the seizure of the device through legal action, though doing so can result in delays or extended questioning during re-entry. So, in other words, you don't have the same rights as a U.S. citizen. They're not going to deny a citizen from coming home, but they can inspect everything. But a legal green card holder is a permanent resident, but more considered a guest. Now, if you're a visa holder or a foreign national, meaning you're coming to the United States, let's say on a school visa, or you just want to go sit on the beach in California or somewhere, visitors with temporary visas who refuse to comply with device may be denied entry into the country and could potentially face deportation proceedings. That at the moment is probably something nobody wants to go through. So to safeguard your personal privacy, you should take proactive steps such as declining to share passwords and documenting interactions with CBP officers. And it's advisable to request the officer's name, badge number, written receipt of any device confiscated for inspection. So just heads up, just FYI on all of this. I think it's super important to understand that as we are going through basically an interesting time in the world, not just here in the United States, we have a lot of considerations that we need to have with our technology. In other words, if you have, let's say, a long history going back 10, 15, almost, I think maybe even 20 years on Facebook at this point, all of that could potentially be used against you in some way, shape, or form. And it's not just the United States government. If you're sitting there, a citizen of X country, like Zambia, for example, and you're sitting there on Facebook just railing against the Zambian government, understand they're looking at that now. So this is an important one, and I think we need to really understand that these things are really coming to fruition, and it's important, and I hate to say it because we should be able to express ourselves as we see fit, ideally in a non-derogatory way on basically anything, but that's not the way the world is shaping up. So make sure that you are heeding this advice and make sure you are taking protections as you're moving cross borders. I don't care where you're going, like the friendliest place on earth. You're going to Sweden or Canada or somewhere, you should still take precautions. So that is your news of the day and tips of the day as well. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, please, please attempt to stay private and secure. Take care.